Thank you, and wonderful to be here in Bangalore with everybody today. And we hope to keep a very engaging session. So, please feel free to sort of give your comments, thoughts as we sort of go through this one.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's what we thought for today is we're going to keep it a little fun. We'll show you what's possible with a lot of generative AI tech, how it applies to a GCC, how it could really enable your operations in a very different way. So the way we wanted to break down the session is we're going to give you three different perspectives. One is on the automation side, one is on the support and search side, one is on the code and content creation side. So we'll give you three different perspectives. We'll talk about active use cases that GCCs and other organizations are really leveraging it for. With each of them, we'll bunch in a nice demo, a live demo to actually show you what it translates into. So we'll actually do quite a few live demos to show how each section that we talk about actually translates into what we're talking about. And towards the end, we'll also kind of have a section around prompt engineering, how to become better prompt engineers, some tips and tricks as a takeaway for everyone to just kind of be able to use a GPT even better than they already do. I'm sure we have an audience that almost everyone's been interacting with GPT on a hopefully daily basis. So look forward to a cracking session today.
Awesome. So, I think what is driving a lot of change is the current way of dealing with anything that's unstructured, like text or images, is fairly slow and difficult, right? Current algorithms are really great. Current, methodologies are great with numbers, structured data, etc. But when you throw it unstructured text, that's not really the solution, right? When you throw it an unstructured image, or when you want generative content coming out, the existing solutions sort of don't fall there anyway. And organizations, incredibly, have 10x the amount of unstructured data that they have of structured data, right? So that's the amount of knowledge that's sitting outside your current systems as we sort of go through this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that key inflection point of the new sets of algorithms with generative AI have come. The key differential is that they really understand the text that they're reading and consuming, as opposed to the traditional approach of the old way of doing NLP, which was a lot of, I would say, a lot of encodings, a lot of regex, or a lot of search, word-based searching, index-based searching, which is now, because the algorithms are able to understand the text that they're reading, that gives you a vast variety of opportunities.
Right. So we're moving from the rule-based world, right, to the pre-trained, the world wherein you had a training set and an output set, to a world which is now pre-trained, right? The models that are working out there, they just need your input or your data, and they work from scratch. There's no training involved any longer. And you move from structured predictions, which the old world could do very well, to unstructured communication now happening at scale. So it almost forces us to think of new use cases, new paradigms, where this kind of technology can come in, because we no longer are bound by the structured world any longer. And the understanding of context, right? I think the maintaining of context is something that's key as well, right? Now, the new technologies that generative AI bring, they continue context throughout the entire journey, rather than always having to reprompt it or give it the full context from start every time. So there's no more instruction, but it's context.
Absolutely. And one of the key concerns when you build a lot of all of this, and we will talk a lot about it as we go through, is obviously security of the information that we have, right? Because this is where the IP of an organization essentially rests. So how do you bring in large language models into your organizations without actually exposing your organizational data to the large language model, right? It's kind of a chicken and egg situation over there. You want the benefits, but you don't want it taking benefits from you in a sense. So we will kind of talk a little bit about that as well.
Right, and how do we sort of bring open this technology to everyone on the floor, right? I think a lot of what's happening right now with generative AI is that, yes, it's being used by a subset of the population, by folks who sort of have seen the technology. But I think one of the things we really need to focus on is how does everyone in an organization get access to it, and where they can play with it on their own terms, right? Whether it doesn't need to be a new tool, can it be part of existing tools and processes?
Absolutely. So just to give a really, really quick context before we dive in, why we feel we're one of the right people to be talking about generative AI. We've been working in the space for about last 10 years, focusing in GPT algorithms for the last 2, 3 years, and in transformer algorithms for the last 5 years, ever since they came out. We were there on the cover of Forbes magazine, and have worked with a lot of global organizations and GCCs, across the world and in India. Again, the banking space and a few others, you'll see those logos. Just yesterday, we were live on NDTV where we were on the debate of whether AI will basically kill all human beings and lead to our extinction. So we'll post this. We'll probably give you some comments or thoughts on that as well. Otherwise, you can catch the reruns on NDTV today. And we've also launched the world's first book written by an AI. It actually launched 15 days before ChatGPT came out. And it was the world's first book written by an AI to become an international bestseller. So we really feel it's come. It's called Bridging the AI Gap. You can get it on Amazon. But the time here has come to actually leverage AI, and it's going to start kind of becoming that centerpiece for a lot of you.
So when we sort of look at the GCC framework or any organization, any enterprise framework, I think there are these three capabilities that are coming right out to us that we feel that if you can use them, you can use these three tomorrow, right? One is the world of search and answer. There's so much unstructured data. Generative AI is great at getting you the right answer and getting it quickly, as well as in the right kind of context. The second is content creation. And when I mean content, I'm blowing it up to not just say typical, the marketing content that we are seeing it being used for, but I'm talking about legal content, I'm talking about procurement contracts, I'm talking about code bases, etc. And the third, which we are most excited for, is automation, right? I think this is going to be a lot more powered through generative AI of how it integrates with the automation.
Absolutely. So let's get to it. Let's start with search and answer.
Right. So 100,000 documents, right? Imagine you have 100,000 textual documents across your entire organization. They are stored in different data stores, etc. How do we get that across in a single second to an answer to an employee who maybe is on a call, who is a customer support employee, or he has a query as well, which is a part of his daily processes? How do we get him an answer in a single second? How do we get the enterprise GPT launched as of today, wherein all your organizational data is searchable, answerable, and further contextually editable to go forward in? So that's what we want. We're really excited with what this technology can bring.
Absolutely. So let's get into a quick demo. And right after the demo, Raghav will walk us through some actual use cases across. So we'll show you one use case, and then we'll actually talk through some of the other use cases when it comes to search and answer. All right. So what we're going to take here is we're going to create a knowledge base, from a bank's website, right? So we've picked one bank at random, so no, it was a random draw though, right? So no favorites here. But we've taken Chase for their credit cards division. So what the team's done is we've pulled in data across their different cards, their different systems, their FAQs as well, and we've kind of then built out the algorithm at the back. So let me show you an example of how it works, right? So let's say this is Chase's, or we go to, let's say, password or PIN, right? So these are some of the questions just to show you what it looks like. Let's just pull this out into the system. So let me save it. And then let's go ahead and throw it into the knowledge base. Right? You can add as much. Obviously, I'm showing you a manual approach of adding to the knowledge base. There are, quite a few interesting ways of actually doing this, and faster ways of doing this. Automations, real-time scripts, but just wanted to show you that we're actually doing this process in real, so wanted to do it the old style, right? So it's taken the content in, we've kind of done this for a lot of the other knowledge units. And then let's go ahead and start interacting with it. Right, so it ingested in real time. There's an LLM at the back. It takes about 30 seconds to add this layer of knowledge into the information set. It'll take it 30 seconds to remove it out. So if I delete something or I update something, it's going to take 30 seconds to reflect. At the back, you can have any LLM of choice, right? Whether deployed privately in your data center or on cloud. And again, there are specialized LLMs, which we'll talk a little bit about later, for different use cases. So let's actually go ahead, and if you can turn the audio up for the laptop. Yeah, thank you. Will applying for a credit card affect my score? what it's doing here is, even though our knowledge base is quite large, we've added a lot of elements. If you see, it starts responding within roughly, depending on the internet speed, anywhere from half a second to 1 second is when you start
Anytime you apply for credit or loan, the creditor or lender will order a copy of your credit report. This is known as a hard inquiry. A significant number of hard inquiries may indicate that you are looking for credit and could lower your credit score. New accounts make up just 10% of your FICO score, however. Some scoring models will treat multiple inquiries within a short period of time as a single new account activity, which won't affect your score much at all. So, yes, applying for a credit card can affect your credit score.
So what you see here also it's doing is that it's also quoting me the sources, right? So it's giving me the sources of information from the particular source, from the knowledge base that I took, in this case the JP Morgan base, and it's giving me the answers based on those three references that I have. Now you can imagine the experience to kind of be able to do all these different layers and at the same time kind of give you the right reference. So imagine if you're a customer support agent and you're running it at scale, you're getting the answer, you're getting the right source reference, and you're moving forward in the process. Right? This could be exposed to a different set of automations. Right? If you're a salesperson, then suddenly giving this automation layer to them and saying, hey, here's the sales document, here's the answer to the question, and then giving the flow through can become a very different productivity experience where we found roughly a gain of about anywhere from 2x to 4x productivity gain, but also being able to reduce the need of training at the staff level. Right? So you could have half the level of training and then do double the productivity. It's almost a 4x multiplier to some extent. Yeah. No, so the content could be in the form of a CSV, a data table, it could be Google Drive, Confluent, SharePoint. We've built connectors to kind of source the content from all these sources. It could be a website scrape as well. Text is definitely something it's really strong at, so irrespective of the format, it'll pretty much manage. Now, the beauty of the approach is that you're not just restricted to, right, so we showed it to you on a particular platform, right, but so I'll just keep flowing through and I'll keep breaking for short questions, otherwise I feel we'll run out of time towards the end. Sorry for that. So, this is one on a UI level, right? So we said, okay, you come to the Fluid GPT platform, you kind of interact with it. But your teams, your agents, your folks are all either on Microsoft Teams, they're on Slack, if that's the choice. Some of your field folks are on WhatsApp, right? If it's if there's no standard communication channel across the organization, there's email as well. So you can suddenly now say that we can have Fluid GPT available across all or have a GPT algorithm for you across your channels. So that's one thing we recommend organizations to start to look at, right? So let me ask another question, saying in the Chase, Freedom, Unlimited card, what is the cashback?
Yeah. Cashback on drugs.
On?
Drugs.
Drugs. So we'll go ahead and throw it on WhatsApp, and while we're waiting for the WhatsApp to come back, so there it goes, right? So it's straight off the back. It's available on WhatsApp. Now, if we go and say, okay, we are on Microsoft Teams, so suddenly you're seeing this one entity, this one ability to interact with a GenAI solution across platforms. And I say, what is the annual fee for the Chase Sapphire Reserve credit card? And suddenly you have, a GenAI solution that's available for a team. When we go to the creation side, we'll actually show you some really cool use cases there where teams can interact on one channel and actually create and do some pretty cool things.
So this is what we're talking about, right? That AI will not rest separately. It will rest where your teams are. Abhinav showed you WhatsApp teams. This is what we believe, that when you look at GenAI, you look at it as a part of your integration strategy rather than as a separate use case going out there and really working with it. And I think, we talked about employee support. I think we went quite deep into that use case. Obviously, you can expose the same layer to customers going forward. Sales is another interesting area where we think the battle card strategy, right? When salespeople are on calls or when they're doing these kind of complex kind of arguments with customers or really walking through a product proposition, this can be that tool that can assist them. And if you have all the documentation why you're better than X, Y, Z, they can push this algorithms to give them the answer so that they have a better response from their final customer. Legal is another interesting area where we have seen the entire contract analysis area has broken down into analyzing these contracts using these kind of LLMs, giving you the answer right then and there. Finally, HR policy is, I think, a no-brainer. There's so much documentation with HR policy, and it's continuously changing, right? So one of the cool things out here is the enterprise data keeps getting updated as almost simultaneously as soon as the core documentation does. So you always have the freshest policy being accessible to employees when they're sort of searching an answer. So this brings open this entire search and answer use case scenario. We've just given you 5 sort of areas where we've seen a lot of traction happening, but it explodes almost from there onwards. But what are the kind of considerations that sort of hold you back, or what do you sort of need to think about when you sort of go deeper into this? One is obviously data privacy, right? Now, a lot of times the concern is that what are you exposing to something like an LLM, right? How is it sort of getting trained? How is it sort of learning and and all of that? I think key strategies, and that's some of the vendors like us are sort of working on, is that your data continues to rest with you, maybe on your cloud or on your premise, but there is a single line of code that sort of connects it to the LLM, which can be broken at any time. So we're not building a replica of your data. It's searchable instantaneously, but it can be broken at any time so that your data is not replicated at least. Also hallucination. I think a lot of challenges, and we've seen this with Gen AI, right? It's a lot about when there was a legal case, it came up with case facts which did not exist or case precedents which did not exist. I think that's where the referenceability is really important, right? When you're saying, what is the reference to each and every answer you're giving me, so that your agents or the folks on ground have 100% confidence in the answers coming from the platform. And finally, the delivery platform, right? I think a lot of times folks are saying, okay, will we have a new Gen AI platform which everyone will go to? I don't think so. That's the way usage is going to be driven. It's going to be driven when it's part of their existing routine, whether it's on Teams, whether it's on Slack, or whether it's part of some other application that they're using. Right?
Absolutely. So coming to the second aspect of it, right, when we talk about content creation and code at scale, right, the key challenge that most organizations face is bringing in the context into either a coding problem or a content creation problem, right? Because if the LLM or chat GPT at the back or whichever GPT you choose to use doesn't understand your particular organization context, it's going to do a very vanilla job of creating any form of content. So that's where the idea of saying that, hey, bring in your content, bring in your code base information, and then make it available to an LLM to start building, really would be a nice approach for your teams to look at to actually building these at scale. Right? So a quick example of that would be drag this out. So let's say we'll select from a series of just good content creation prompts that we have, and kind of pick up something like a nice prompt that we can use. So let's say we're looking at creating a blog, say a blog post, kind of pull this particular prompt in and say, let's say we want to talk, again, taking the same example, same data set that we took, so the Chase Freedom Flex card this time, right? Flex credit card, and then the blog must be this, too short to focus on cashback, let's say, at the gas station. Let's make it let's make it a fun tone, and let's make the length short. Right. So suddenly being able to pull in a lot of case data in, because it's already there in the database. It understands the product, it understands the offering, allows your teams to create much faster and build concepts much faster. Now the same paradigm actually applies to coding as well, right? I know a lot of folks these days, compared to the Stack Overflow days, are now using ChatGPT.
If you're someone who spends a lot of time
I'm going to stop. Yeah. So a lot of folks use ChatGPT to code, right? Like, or get ideas for code. But imagine if you were able to give your context of your code base, right? This is, let's say we're using MongoDB. This is my schema for my analytics tables. These are my schemas for my collections base. And now saying I want to write a query that joins my collections base with my customer base. It's going to suddenly be able to give you an answer that's far superior than just simply going and prompting and saying, give me a join. And that's, this is a classic example here where we kind of said, okay, show me a Python notebook that connects these two bases. We'd already fed it knowledge of some of the the key bases that it had. It was able to generate that entire code base that a coder could leverage, and it's referenced the customer collection here and the KYC collection. So suddenly it becomes very powerful from a coding perspective as well when you use two things, right? One is context and one is you use the right model. So having a right code-based LLM at the back piped through to this suddenly lifts your performance from using vanilla ChatGPT to at least 1.5 to 2x in terms of speed that you get throughout your organization. And that's something we feel GCCs should definitely look at. The other thing is collaboration, right? So, like for example, Raghav, you got your phone. You can have something like having this as a, like, look at it as bringing it to where you are, right? As opposed to going to where the Gen AI platforms are, try and bring them to where your teams work. So imagine bringing them into a Slack and then people just chatting, saying, okay, someone's thrown in a prompt, got a response, and another team member comes in and modifies that prompt saying, remove the hashtags, right? So let me just send it, remove the hashtags. It's going to keep the context in, and then it's going to actually go ahead and kind of give me a feedback with, so right, there you go. I've got a tweet now for JP Morgan without the hashtags. Now Raghav could go into the same channel, message it and say, add this or modify this. So suddenly Gen AI now stops being this activity that I sit alone in a computer and keep prompting it and trying to figure out a solution and then go to my team and say, hey guys, I found the solution, or I've generated this piece of content, give me feedback. It becomes an activity where team members at scale actually work together and kind of build content, build prompts, or work on pieces together in a collaborative nature, which becomes very different from the traditional way of doing it. So Raghav's going to, ask you to do something, and while he does it, I'll actually go ahead and, so Raghav's now kind of pinged it and said, make it funnier. So now the GPT layer is going to come back, and there you go. So I'll give it a fun spin, and choosing a credit card is like choosing a date. You got to check your credit score, see what rewards they offer, and make sure they're not going to charge you too much. Swipe right on the perfect credit card match. So that's the concept here when it comes to content creation.
Yeah, so I think what we want to say is that essentially is that, again, I think we've talked about the three use cases, marketing and code. I think Abhinav sort of worked through it. I think legal is another very interesting area. We have seen, if your legal templates and all are in play, it's as simple as telling these algorithms to go ahead and sort of create those contracts out of it, or really just go ahead and, create a policy out of, maybe if you can give it the guidelines and if you have a few old policies in, it can create new policies fairly quickly. I think one thing is that, when it comes to content, it's the tonality. I think that's where things like, if we can train teams to be better prompt engineers, or we can give them tools, like, right? We could have just simply told it to write a blog, but if we give them the prompt, the larger prompts which go deeper and which sort of converse with it, that's when the content really becomes rich and exciting to sort of talk about. And I think there's always going to be an element about the robustness of the governance, right? In terms of how is this content that's coming out, what is the governance that you as companies and enterprises will apply so that you ensure that it's up to spec, up to standard.
Yeah, and I talked about the code example, right? And, we work closely with the nasscom Future Skills Prime team as well. So before I go into the final segment on automation, having the right talent, obviously everyone knows is super, super key to actually building out a lot of what a GCC makes. And one of the best approaches is to actually work more at the grassroots level, right? Go more down to the level of saying, hey, can I take, everyone complains about the talent that they get, right? And training this talent up. But if you had the opportunity, imagine of working with a team that actually works with the government to say, hey, can we design the right courses? Can we design the right programs? Can we design the right way of getting these people credits for when their skills are relevant? You can actually then work at another level where you're proactively changing the face of the talent you're bringing in. You're designing the talent the way you want them at the education level, bringing them into your GCC or your organization, and then leveraging them at a much, much faster level, right? So suddenly you're playing at a very different level. It's a very long-term play, but the value it brings is phenomenal. So would definitely recommend you to reach out to the nasscom Future Skills team, and they definitely be able to work with you very collaboratively on that interesting use case. So coming to the last one, which is automation. So this pillar, right, of being able to process documents, unstructured contracts, written documents at scale, and giving you structured information can become very powerful from multiple use cases. And while Raghav will talk through them, I'll just give you an example of the ability of now suddenly going and saying, hey, I don't need to train it on the structure of this document anymore. Irrespective of the kind of document I'm throwing at it, I can automate this process. Brings in some very refreshing ideas. So we thought the number one idea that, or the number one demo that we wanted to show for the automation side is obviously recruiting is a challenge. I just talked about the great work that the Future Skills team is doing. So how can we bring or make processing resumes easy, right? That's a great example of lots of unstructured text that's coming in, and then
No format.
yeah, no formats. Everyone's following their own format, and then suddenly being able to process them at scale and giving you qualitative, quantitative feedback both at scale. So that's what we thought would be a cool example to show you guys. So what we've done here is this was an automation one. So it typically doesn't have a UI to it, which is why I'm opening up a backend API screen. Because you typically take the resume, pipe it through an API, send it to a Google Sheet, or to your ATS system at the back. But imagine, what we've told it is saying, act like a hiring manager at an AI company who's recruiting for a Python developer, who knows AI applications, and then we've asked you to rate the candidate on a scale of 1 to 5 on different parameters, and then give a full quantitative score at the end, and then also give its recommendation whether we should choose this candidate or not. And I've thrown it 2 resumes, right? So we can just quickly show you what the resume looks like. Oh. Sorry. So yeah. So this is an example of a resume we're throwing in, right? The person's put his experience, knowledge, skills, projects that they worked on, certifications, academics, etc. And now imagine we've thrown in a couple of them. We've thrown in 2. Kind of hit execute. It'll run in the background, and what it does is essentially populating a Google Sheet at the back. So there you go. You have this Google Sheet that's saying, okay, we first asked a score of 5 across the different parameters. So it's broken it down to saying experience in Python, I give this person a 5. Overall ability, I give it a 4. Leadership and team working 3. Data structures 4. Ability to work independently 5. And gives a total score of 21 out of 25. It's given actual factors for each. And it's also gone ahead and said the candidate's experience in Python to work independently is particularly strong. It's gone ahead to then, we've asked it a second question, right? So we asked it, one was this, and we asked it, should the candidate be called for an interview? And then this one, it said, yes, let's go ahead and call it based on all the knowledge that they have. This is candidate number 2. Again, their score is 19 out of 25. And then it's saying it's difficult to confirm whether this candidate should be called for the role of a full stack, as not several factors are missing, and it's kind of given out a lot of details, right? But if you see the power of just putting a prompt in and then automating 10,000 resumes that come in, the amount of efficiency that you can bring in terms of the quality of hiring that you can do or selection you can do based on the unstructured data you have, suddenly becomes at parallel with structured data. So we always look at recruiting as that way of trying to convert unstructured data to structured by giving them tests or processes. This is a left field approach. It can be applied across different ideas as well, and Raghav will quickly talk through them.
Yeah, so, again, I think, the technology is open to what you sort of dream of about it, but areas where we've seen folks use it, accounting and finance, invoice processing, reconciling contracts with the kind of POs being raised or the invoices, that's been a fantastic field. Marketing, one of the left field ideas one company used it for was they said, okay, we have all this marketing content, but our products keep changing. And we're not sure whether the website has all accurate data, all our brochures have all accurate data. So they actually put in the data and they're searching all their web content, all their brochures, PDFs to ensure that all content is accurate with the latest product specs, prices, etc. And similarly, legal and HR also, HR we just showed you, and legal, analyzing contracts, seeing which ones have terms which are not, good for you, etc., or which need change.
So we just on the positive time, we kind of dump a bit, and like we said, right? It's about giving secure access, so you can choose between you should think about using a public LLM, private LLM, depending on the use case, depending on what kind of makes sense, what kind of data you're dealing with, and depending on how you can get started. Maybe Raghav, you want to cover this, and then.
Yeah, so I think one of the key things is, let your organizations dream wide. Let them sort of bring your needs to you and then sort of say, okay, what can be done easily, quickly? Because almost everything can be done by Gen AI. They're already dreaming these use cases. They're already using GPT for fun or maybe for some casual stuff. So I think let that assessment of needs sort of be a very wide open pool and then sort of really drill down to specific use cases which align with your business goals maybe for the next quarter or 6 months. And we really believe that if you can sort of allow teams to encourage that exploration, to use it in their everyday, whether it be in tools like Teams or Slack or WhatsApp, or introduce them to Gen AI as a general tool, give them that one example, that one case study, I think that's when we see teams sort of really dream big and get ahead.
Absolutely. So, we'll open for questions, and I think we're going to have a quick minute from the nasscom team member, and then we'll kind of open for questions. And while she starts, I'm just going to put up one slide of one way of using GPT smartly, but at the end we'll kind of cover a few others.
Hi. So you've been hearing about Future Skills Prime. So one thing which is probably of interest to you is how do you say that India has the best digital talent in the world? Right, so that's something which is important to you, and I'm sure each of you are doing something at your level to make sure that your pipeline is stable and your employees are reskilling and upskilling and up to the mark. We just wanted to tell you about what government is also doing in this area, and then we are part of nasscom, a program by Ministry of Electronics and IT and nasscom together to make India the digital talent hub or retain that position. And there is a lot of effort going on how do we all talk the same language when it comes to skill, right? Because each one of us has some fancy element. Maybe there is something which is very fundamental, which we can all agree on saying. There is a taxonomy that all of us can work on, so that the pipeline and the entire, this is covered, right? So when academia trains people on certain skills, how do they align it to what the industry for, and so that even the students have an understanding of where are they leading when they learn all these things. And then training partners, there's so many content providers, training partners who are there. Now, how do you say this aligns skill? So there is amount of standardization that's happening in India. India is trying to move from degrees to skills, okay? And also creating a culture of continuous learning. There is a lot of interesting things happening when NEP comes in full-fledged. National Credit Framework, how do we motivate all these people to learn? I'm sure when Raghav and Abhinav were talking about all these things, who's going to implement all this? How is my team doing things which are not related to this, getting upskilled on this? How do we motivate, right? So that's where we have some answers, so do read out. So in a nutshell, what we can do for you is, we've already done it with the BPM Council. Whoever is part of BPM Council and ER&D would know. We've curated some fundamental programs and then trying to inject it into the curriculum, right? So we work with AICT, UGC, such bodies also, and also with state skill missions and universities. We can get that back into the curriculum and then give you an opportunity to see how the progress is happening. That's, there are mentors from your organization who are in touch with that course. as the course is progressed. All that can be done. So reach out to us. ID at the last and reach out.
Thank you. So, we'll quickly open up for questions. And while we're waiting for people to raise their hand, okay, we have a question already. Sure, absolutely. So, this was the thing I wrote. Show me a Python notebook which can connect to MongoDB and then connect the customer collection with the KYC collection based on the ID key and print all combined keys. So what it injected into the knowledge automatically was or the definitions of the customer collection key and the KYC key, based on which then it was able to generate the prints and everything for it and make sure that the key matches are correct or not. Yeah. As long as the schema documents are even if the image, actually we have a processor to process. So you're right. You can take in different kinds of documents into it and process.
So quick question.
Go ahead. Sorry.
So how easy or complex it is to integrate with other LLMs? For example, in many of these organizations, me and my colleagues are from London Stock Exchange. So many of the tasks are repetitive. So let's say we want to evaluate, let's say about 400,000 company websites and get some data out of those websites. Although we have technology to grab the relevant sections, we want specific information to be grabbed from those websites.
Yeah.
So the scale at which, of course, you displayed that you can do this with 10,000, resumes. What is the scale, maximum scale that we can get this to, and what is the associated cost?
Yeah.
If you're talking about hundreds and thousands of websites and grabbing data from them.
So this actually brings us to a very interesting point. So the question is very apt. Is that when you look at scale and cost for an LLM, right? What you should factor are essentially two things. One is the cloud. So there's a decision between private LLM and public LLM. So a public LLM is going to allow you to scale infinitely quickly. So it means that if you're even running high concurrency rates, so you're doing 400,000 websites at scale, you're going to be able to do it very quickly because you're not going to be constricted by the element of scaling in, scaling out. That's going to be handled by the public LLM automatically. The problem that comes in is you're going to be charged per API request or per pull request that you're doing. So the cost will start to exponentially go up, which is where a private LLM comes. Right? You could use a private LLM. It'll be a little slower. So if the real-timeness is not that key, right? If you don't want 400,000 documents processed in, let's say, a matter of a few hours, and you're okay if it spans to a day or 2 days, then a private LLM could actually work out more cost efficient because then suddenly you're not paying per request. You're paying a fixed fee for hosting that private LLM in your private cloud. And then you hit it as many times, but it's not going to scale out, right? The minute you want it to scale out, you're paying double the cost because you're suddenly setting up a second container or instance in your cloud. So I think we kind of have a math at the back. When you kind of come with a use case, we kind of calculate the number of tokens and we'll tell you that would it end up being cheaper in a private LLM, would it end up being cheaper in a public LLM? So that's the way we look at the process.
Sorry, just another question and possibly one question on the tokens. So how many characters does one token handle with this particular use case with Fluid AI?
The token logic for us is standard. Like there's I think a standard metric across all the global LLMs for token calculation, which is roughly one token is 3/4 of a word. So it kind of for us it's a pass through. We'll help you set up a private LLM if you want with Fluid GPT layers on top. If you want to use a public LLM, you can do that as well. The token calculation and the cost will be the exact same.
Last question. How does it handle images and data reading from images?
Yeah. So these systems that we've developed support any form of image as well. So they have inbuilt OCR in them. So if you do, they are multimodal. So if you do pass it, let's say an image with lots of text in it, it will be able to parse it out and read it in a multimodal fashion. So that's typically not a challenge. Video, it doesn't do as of yet. So I think that's where we probably say video you'd still have to build some wrapper to say convert this video to images frame by frame when a frame changes and then do something. So there I feel the tech is still catching up over there.
Abhinav, I had a question on how do you choose private LLM? So I'm here. So, so when you choose a private LLM, let's say we take it from you, it would have a lot of training and therefore the advantage, but it would also have some biases. Whereas if we, give it our training data, it will take us time, but we will probably, be a lot more. It will be a lot more proprietary. So what are the trade-offs, and can you comment on how does one go about choosing from different private LLMs?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think in the private LLM market, you have about 7-8 options that you can actually go with. Performance roughly varies anywhere from, if you look at it from a general benchmark, which is what ChatGPT and let's say Bard and all compare themselves to. There are other better benchmarks if you're using it for a specialized use case, like the resume one. It's a specialized use case. But let's say if we just look at the generic benchmarks, you'd get anywhere from 70% to 85% quality to what a ChatGPT would offer you, which is the industry gold standard right now, if you go with a private LLM. On specific tasks, you might actually be pretty close, right? You might actually hit 97, 98 as well. If I look at, let's say, summarization or some very, very key tasks that I'm looking at, then the gap starts to reduce quite significantly. Out of the various models that are available, I think the decision is typically made on, one is size of the model. The larger the model is going to be slower in terms of the response times, and it's going to cost you a lot more, right? So you could need anywhere from a 16 GB NVIDIA dedicated card all the way to 64 GB NVIDIA dedicated, right? So the A10Gs, and you start with like a T4, which is the lower end line. So then that defines your yearly cost, right? Also, there's an element of, okay, can we switch off the server, switch it on? So that halves your cost, right? If you're saying nighttime, I don't need it on 24/7. And between the 7, 8 that we offer at Fluid, the way of choosing about it is really when we sit down and say, okay, what is the use case you're looking at solving? We have actually an inbuilt eval benchmark that we have. So we'll take some of your sample sets, put it through the eval benchmark, and probably tell you, okay, this model will perform far better than this model, and you'll probably use, let's say, instead of a 7 billion or a 14 billion parameter or a 75 billion parameter model, you can use a 3 billion parameter model and get away with it the same quality. The other key thing that you need to be very careful about is the licensing. Because, and that's where we help a lot, is that the data sets that these models are trained on often have their own licensing associated. So you have to be very careful to not get into a situation where you use a model that was trained on a data set which was common use term and not allowed for MIT or Apache 2 license. So those are some of the factors I would say you should think about when actually looking at doing a private LLM and kind of taking them layer by layer.
So one question from the PII data, the data which is supposed to be secured, and you don't have accessibility of everybody because every country has a different PII regulations. How is the security and the PII data processing is considered in the private and public both? And that's, I think, one of the hampers of using it at the moment to a larger extent. So is there inbuilt model we could write to mask or redact the PII data and still utilize them in those kinds of use cases?
I think there are two approaches. One is manual redaction, which is code-based redaction, right? You write a very simplistic code to redact certain fields, like you check a credit card, you check a name, etc. There's GPT redaction, which is you tell the GPT to find out all PII data in the content that you're sending. It will redact it and then send it to the LLM. The problem with GPT redaction is you're sending it to the GPT to redact, right? So there the approach is you use like a public LLM and a private LLM. So private LLM is in charge of redaction. Public LLM is in charge of doing the actual task. You can also look at just using a private LLM in that scenario where you don't redact them. Because the private LLM is hosted locally, you then just send it with PII data. And then you're not worried about it because the model is your own. So you're comfortable about the data passed through that. The data is being used by the LLM and then being discarded. That's something you can then build a verification on. So those are, I feel, the couple of approaches that you would look at.
Yeah, so I guess it's not working. I'll just ask it anyway. So
in today's time when data or code is also considered as a electronic data, right? When we are talking about code, one of the biggest problems that I saw when looking through all of the code completion codes and ChatGPT is that when you try to push it into your organization at a scale, what happens is there's a lot of data redundancy, right? If someone asks for a very simple thing like a prime number code, right? The AI tool will give them the generated code again and again, although it would be correct, but the number of the repetition of that code and the size of the storage of the code increases, right? So have you thought about that and in the direction on how this could be solved?
Yeah, I think typically most code, when you look at functional programming or object-oriented programming, the only way currently that's built to catch this is at the merge request level, right? Pull request comes in with the code saying I want to merge this into my master repository, and either there's an automated check, something like a sonar cube running to check, okay, is there a duplication of this function existing somewhere else, or a human eye seeing that, okay, this logic is rewritten in a different format, but it's the same semantic logic. So your question is there a better way of doing that?
No, when
Deduping
you,
or at the time of writing?
No, when you start asking the AI tool, can the AI tool refer you to an inner source repository or an open source repository that you can say that, okay, this...
Your own repositories.
Exactly. Inside our own repositories that, okay, this code is there which you can reuse.
Yeah. So there actually the search and answer capability applies to code as well. So there you could actually, we've seen teams use it that way, actually very interesting, right? So if they're looking at creating, let's say, like you said, right, a prime number function, they'll search, is there a prime number function there? I want to do this activity. Search through your big code base, your documentation, and guide you saying, it's already been done, this is where it is. So yes, that's a very powerful.
No, that's where we've seen some very interesting use cases. Folks have been uploading Excel data because Excel is right now the lifeblood, or at most maybe you have some SAP integrations going on as well. So both of them sort of flow in quite well, and then you sort of use this as we have seen use cases more on the validation side actually to see, okay, our expenses in this field over and above, or what, a sort of a data scientist assistant almost in some sense, wherein you don't need to use Excel every time or a pivot table, etc. But planning is an interesting use case. I think with the right kind of prompting, you could sort of use that same data to sort of forecast out. So I think as long as the connectors are there, and Excel is a fairly easy consumption platform, financial planning can also happen.
Yeah, I think the only balance that needs to be built when you're using it for financial modeling is to figure out where GPT will add value and where Excel formulas will add value, because there's a very gray area between the two where what can help. So I think that's the...
And then reconverting, it's a big process, and the knowledge also.
Correct.
So how you can help us in this stream?
Yeah, absolutely. So the question was on how do we modernize, can generative AI help in, modernizing an architecture? If we're shifting it from one platform to a modern platform, can it help the teams in that? So absolutely, I think, a pure GPT, like a chat GPT could help you rewrite some of your, like say you're moving from SQL to Mongo, right, from a database perspective. So I'll go from easiest to most complex variant, which gives you the most value, right? Easiest is to put it up in ChatGPT, then convert this SQL query to a MongoDB query and test it. Doesn't work that great, but gives it half decent job. Using a better LLM, like a LLM built for code, unlike ChatGPT, which is built for more generic use cases, will take you a little, I think I'll give you a 20% jump on that performance itself, right? The quality of the output will start to improve quite significantly. From there, once you give it context, you'll get another 40-50% jump where it says, okay, I know the collections, I know the table structures that you have, I know what the foreign keys that you have, I have all this documentation. So now when I'm giving you a query rewrite, I'm keeping that in mind and then giving you a query rewrite. So the dev has to do even lesser thinking and effort. So I think those would be the three layers that would help. So I think at level 3, the modernization does become far superior when you go to level push. Yeah. Yeah. So there are code-specific LLMs that we provide, which are trained and specifically built for outputting code, and less for like not good at outputting a blog, for example, like a textual blog. So they understand the nuances of code better, the syntactical elements of code, because sometimes an algorithm like ChatGPT takes a few liberties when it comes to code because it's treating it like text. So that's why we find a massive. Correct. Yeah. So quickly, just one. Yep. Yep. Yep.
Yeah, no, so when you look at the training part of these models, I think, and we sort of answered a little earlier, is that the redaction of PII is important, right? So in that scenario, if there's no PII data moving into the training of the LLM itself, the model has not been trained on that person's personal information. It's only been trained on maybe behavioral stuff, which has been anonymized as well. So in a right to be forgotten use case, I think I'm fairly sure about this, you can still maintain the behavioral traits as long as the person identity is forgotten itself, right? So there is no identification data that's moved into the LLM. It's merely an anonymized data that's moving. So that's where the redaction layer, or where you're redacting all PII data when on the training set, is important when you do these LLM training.
Awesome. So just a last quick snippet. Just if you want to, when you're prompting ChatGPT, if you want to make it an expert, ask it to actually go ahead and say, act like X, right? So act like you're a seasoned marketer from Ogilvy and a Harvard graduate, and then you ask it to do the task. It'll do a far better job of it. When you want to teach it your writing style, give it your writing style, right? Saying, I write a blog like this, now write it in my tone of voice. In the solutions that we showed, that automatically gets added, because if you have your blogs, etc. in it, it'll automatically add it when you're actually prompting it, so it kind of saves you a lot of that time. I ask it to prompt it like saying, talk in the style of XYZ, right? So talk in the style of Warren Buffett, talk in the style, write a poem in the style of Sylvia Plath, really upgrades the quality that you get. Ask it to challenge notions, right? Instead of asking, give me 5 benefits of AI, say, give it a counterintuitive approach, saying, I don't think AI will do well. What do you think? Right? So suddenly it's going to start giving a very different set of answers, improve the quality of the prompt. And the last is, you can actually ask it to output in very different formats. I think most people just ask text, but ask for tables, ASCII formats, tweet formats, and suddenly you'll start seeing the quality of output that you get is very different and very unique to using some of this. A lot of the tools that we provide all these as a suite of inbuilt prompts that you can leverage out of, so it makes it a lot faster. But just wanted to give everyone a quick takeaway that they can go home and try it and use GPT a little better. So thank you everyone. Appreciate the time today. And
for more content on tech and leadership, subscribe to NASSCOM YouTube channel and press the bell icon to never miss an update.